Hello, I'm Stuart Ashen. I am also known as Ashens, and I run a YouTube channel where we talk about very low quality products and video games and things like that. Also, I am a screenwriter and actor, and I recently released a book about terrible old video games because nobody else was.
Hello!
Yeah, but me before YouTube was very different. I mostly did administrative stuff, worked in offices, ran a department for a pensions company, worked for adult social services for a while. All the fun jobs everybody really dreams about doing when they leave school. That was sarcastic. Basically, the actual YouTube channel started kind of by accident. I mean, I was always obsessed with the games and sort of video stuff, and making your own little video bits I always found quite exciting. There was an old television program called Takeover TV, featured Adam Buxton and Joe Cornish back in the day, and I'm being quite sort of impressed with this. Just people sending in camcorder clips, you know. But eventually that, of course, kind of became YouTube, culturally at least. Yeah, somebody on an old video games forum mentioned they'd been on eBay and found this thing called a pop station, which was a terrible rip-off of an old Sony PSP, like really awful. And it was about £5. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to buy that. I did, and I was amused by it, and just filmed this sort of quick video on my DV cam, just sort of improvising what it was about for a couple of minutes. And I thought only like 15 people would ever watch it. But instead it got picked up by Beta, the big sort of online newsletter for a Friday, and like 70,000 people downloaded it, because it was in the days before there was online video hosting at all, so you had to download a WMV file, you know. But it was massively successful, and I hadn't said I'd made it. I'd written a few sort of humorous articles and done animations and things online, hadn't linked the website or anything. Other people were pretending they'd made it. So I did a second one to prove I'd made the first. And that proved more popular still. I thought, this is weird. Did a third one thinking that people would be sick of it now and would round it out, and it was more popular still, and just kept on at it for 10 years now. And I've made so much money from YouTube, I could nearly buy a sandwich. It weren't big numbers at the start, but there weren't big numbers on YouTube at all, really, in the early days. But it sort of got its own little bit of momentum from that. And I don't know how many of them would have followed on from Beta or whatever, because I don't think there would have ever been a direct link given in the newsletter between the two, although I'd have to check to sort of be 100% on that. It's weird, it just kind of builds up its own audience over time, but obviously with the massive, massive amount of audience that YouTube has now garnered over the years, it gets in a lot quicker, and the more views you get, the more chance you're being picked up by the algorithm and put as a featured video in other things, and then that garners more and more until it reaches a sort of almost stone at the top of the hill effect. Whereas you've got a channel like, I mean, PewDiePie, the most popular one, when it gets to a certain point, it's whoa, all of a sudden everything, your statistics shoot up and everybody's seeing your videos, whether they like them or not, really. So I mean, obviously now I make enough money to actually live off just from YouTube itself, essentially. Excuse me. So that's a massive change there. I can, you know, get involved in all these other projects and creative things where just previously it wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have been able to, you know, make a film previously or anything like that. You need the time, and to be sort of in that space as well, I think helps with the creative process. It does change some things. For instance, your inbox becomes unmanageable. You can't answer emails anymore. You have to be very careful trying to pick out the ones from friends or for business things, because you just literally couldn't respond to things unless you had somebody employed to sit there all day responding, which would not really be a career anybody would want, I don't think. To be honest, I kind of read everything, if only quickly to skim, because I'm always paranoid of missing something. I even have a business address, which technically sort of my agent looks over, but I look over that as well. I think that's a throwback to when you start something from something so small yourself and you have control and it gets bigger, you kind of always want to keep an eye on things. You don't want to miss anything, do you know what I mean? You don't want some amazing email to come through or something you feel is important, or you just don't want to miss that important thing, so you do tend to keep an eye on stuff. But I do generally read everything, but you just don't have the time to reply. Oh my God. When I came to the computer museum and you said, oh, you'll have to excuse, we've got boxes of stuff everywhere, I was like, I live in a house like that. It's getting to a kind of event horizon now where I think it's going to get to the point where I can't deal with it, but every day there's quite large boxes turning up, and I have a lot of cardboard just from the boxes to dispose of. And then you've got sort of bits of tap people have sent in, like, oh God, I've already reviewed that, or oh, I can't do a lot with that one. And you end up getting a lot of stuff to charity shops, some of the stuff you just have to bin. I was sent a box yesterday that's 5 foot tall. And I wasn't expecting it at all. What is it? Opened it up and there's a couple of giant Star Wars figures in, just randomly sent by somebody. The thing is, I don't sort of have storage facilities or anything, other than a garage, which is now very full, so you have to be so careful what I can keep and what I can get rid of, and I don't like to get rid of things, that slight hoarder mentality, which doesn't help. So a lot of my time is spent trying to keep things tidy and failing miserably, usually, and sifting through big boxes thinking, oh, I'm going to have to get rid of that, or where do I get rid of that one too? And asking people if they want things. If I've got a friend who's into one specific franchise or something, great, I'll give you everything from that. Please take it before I drown. You soon get used to it because you have to, really. But the sheer amount of stuff from the PO box, at the moment at least, is proving difficult to keep on top of. I'm kind of running out of rooms to store stuff. But it's a nice problem to have. It'd be better than if nobody was sending in anything. I have no idea. The older people like me on YouTube, we do have a kind of feeling that it's all going to get up all of a sudden. So we're kind of, well, we need a kind of escape plan. I can also do this, I can also do that, keep things going that, so they'll need it to an extent, blah, blah, blah. Because the thing is, when you're very dependent on something that's so immediate as YouTube, it can go away immediately as well. So you have to kind of have an exit plan, so to speak. Although mine is very poor. Mine is kind of starve under a bridge at the moment, which hasn't had a lot of thought put into it. But where it's going to go, I've got no idea. Because it's a case of it keeps getting bigger and bigger. Maybe it'll suddenly disappear, maybe it won't, maybe it'll slowly turn to something else. Will it kind of morph into a kind of Netflix kind of thing, where it's just fewer things of higher quality? Will there still be a place for YouTube? The problem is, it's all so new, so emerging and so fast, nobody really knows. Some people will take your money and tell you they'll advise you on it, but they don't know any more than we do, I don't think. I mean, MySpace is the perfect example. Everybody was on MySpace, everybody was friends with Tom, turning around, looking at his whiteboard, you know, and then kind of, oh, it's not really such a thing anymore, but now it's the biggest thing for music. Every band has a MySpace page. You follow the MySpace page as that. Then suddenly, gone. All value gone. Logo changed to a weird thing where it just says My and a physical space. Who thought that was a good idea? And do the kids know what MySpace is now? It must seem ancient to them, even though it was basically only invented a few years ago, really. You never know where these things are going to go, or when they're going to suddenly stop, or somebody comes in with a very clever idea to replace it. I mean, linear programming, as they call it, the old-fashioned television, where program X is on at time Y, is really becoming less and less of a thing. I mean, the great example is children. If a small child wants to watch Peppa Pig, I mean, imagine that in the 80s, if Peppa Pig was on then, instead we're watching, you know, Crystal Tips and Alistair or whatever. Right, you can only watch Peppa Pig at 4 o'clock on a Friday, and you've got to use that big screen in one room, and if somebody else wants to watch something, you can't see it. To a child now, that seems absolutely ludicrous. They can pick up a phone, or a tablet usually, and just press Netflix, Peppa Pig, and there is Peppa Pig doing whatever Peppa Pig does. Killing insurgents. I think that's how the plots go, I'm not entirely sure. And, you know, this whole concept, the linear stuff, just does seem ridiculous. Why? Why have I got to wait till a certain time? Why, if I miss it, is it gone forever? This sort of immediacy, I think, is getting more and more important for a lot of people. Even a lot of older people now say, oh, I don't have a television. I'm like, well, yes, you do. I can see it from here. Oh, I mean, I don't watch, you know, television as it's broadcast. Everything I get is from, you know, iPlayer or Netflix or some sort of catch-up service, maybe even recorded on a digital box from a certain stage. And I think the way it's going is there is going to be more immediacy along those lines and less of the linear stuff. They can still have, yeah, there'll be events like, oh, the new series of big Netflix series A is going to come out at Tuesday at 8 o'clock, and everybody can watch the new episode then. Although on Netflix, they'll often put the entire series up at once. That's another thing. So there's still going to be an event, for the simple reason that there's always going to be a time when something new appears. You know, 1 second it isn't there, 1 second it is, and people who really want to see it will want to see it as soon as possible. But the actual concept of having to have 24 hours a day, a whole schedule of different things, I think that's going to go away, as we understand it anyway, because there's just no need for it. Everything can be more on demand, and everything to an extent can be more niche. perhaps lower budget stuff, but if you're really interested in, Serbo-Croatian architecture from the 17th century, at the moment you've got to hope that somebody who's commissioning at Channel 4 is keen on it. Whereas a move to something sort of more personal and niche like YouTube, etc., you could get something that was perhaps a lot cheaper to make and doesn't look as pretty, but will be far more interesting to your, particular targeted interest. I think the main negative side at having everything nearly everything on demand is that you're not going to stumble across things by accident so much. There was the old case of, going back to the architecture thing, I remember catching something from Lucinda Lampton, who used to sort of just wander around interesting places in the UK. And that's not something I would have ever sought out to watch, because I didn't really have any interest in that. I remember catching it, it was very interesting. Properly, that was really good, when's that next on? If you've just got a list of things, you become more and more targeted in the few things you're interested in and can perhaps get deeper into it, and you're not going to discover things by accident like you used to. You've just got to hope that somebody else recommends it and perhaps you go along with it. But that's something we're seeing on the internet already. Demographics are getting tighter and people are getting more and more focused in their interests, particularly because it's with the internet, etc. You can find out a lot more information about things than you used to. If you were interested in an actor back in the day and suddenly you found, they did a film, I'd never heard of that. If you wanted to look up an actor's filmography, you pretty much had to go to the library. Now it takes 2 seconds on your phone from a myriad of sites, and they're likely to have small little things listed that maybe the actor wouldn't have put in an encyclopedia. You can find out they played Mr. Gronk in one episode of Billy's Potato Harvest on some obscure channel in 1974. If you're just surfing on the net and you see an interesting link and you can just scan it and read it like that, it's not going to take up much time. But you'd be surprised the amount of people who won't start a film or a TV thing now because, I'm not so interested, I'm going to watch this instead. And it's that investment of time that's the thing, because everything is getting smaller and shorter and more immediate, or more marketable, I think is actually the sort of crux of it at the end of the day. People are, more likely to watch a 5-minute viral video than they are to actually sit down into something deeper that might, give you more of an interest. There's a good book on this called The Shallows, where it sort of posits that we're getting sort of surrounding ourselves more with echo chambers, but also not looking as deeply into things as we used to do, because it's constant stimulation from many sources, which I know is an argument they've had for many years. You can go back and find articles about this damn new radio, the children aren't going outside anymore, they're all listening to The Shadow and things like that. So it's always been an argument that's there, but now with the real immediacy and constant sort of shouting from all directions, perhaps it's getting more of a legitimate worry. Yeah, one of the problems can be the channels get very tightly focused on just doing one thing. And then after you've done that for a while, the audience doesn't like it if you do something slightly different. Which is why I try and, I'll do different things every occasionally. There'll be an animation or a sketch, or I'll do something very different sort of product to what I'd normally do, just to keep it sort of a bit looser so people aren't suddenly surprised if you do something new, because often you need to do something different yourself creatively, or you're going to get bored with it. And if you get bored with what you're doing, that will really come through to the audience. A lot of YouTube channels are dangerously specific. It'll be like, here's my channel for X, here's my channel for Y, here's my channel for Z. Well, if you'd actually just put them all on the same channel in the first place, you wouldn't be fragmenting the audience that way, because the audience really isn't daft. It's not a case of, I will only watch videos about potatoes on this channel, and if it's a video about celery, I will not watch it. Well, no, what they'll do is they'll watch the potato video, and if they don't like the celery one, they'll skip it and watch the next potato one. You haven't got to have potato channel and celery channel. And incidentally, if you do start a YouTube channel based about vegetables, I want 20% of the revenue. Because to try and create something that you're not really interested in is very difficult. It's something I've noticed a lot more from the gaming channels, particularly if they're stuck on a certain type of game. Like, this is a Minecraft channel. 2 years later, I would rather die than play Minecraft again, but it pays all my bills. I've got kids, we need food to eat to live. I've just got to keep going with this thing. And it can really get people down. I don't know if there's a way. I suppose the answer really is to try and be a little bit more, sort of get a bit more variety in at the start. But of course you do tend to gravitate towards the things the audience likes more, has a bigger reception to. I think you need to do stuff for yourself sometimes, even if it costs you a bit of money. Because if you do just chase whichever videos are doing the best, and it becomes a very businessy thing, you lose the creative aspect of it, and then it's going to be very hard for you down the line when it's become just a job, and you're parading around in front of a camera with, you know, your Minecraft cakes or whatever, and you don't feel there's any escape. Yeah, we're vaguely aware of each other. There's certain groups of people who do similar stuff who tend to know each other. That's a hard one because there's often a lot of people who work very much on their own, so you don't need such a big support network for it. So there's some people who are sort of entirely aside. There's some people I know who know other people. There's quite a big group in Brighton where PewDiePie, the biggest YouTuber, lives at the moment. And there's sort of a group of quite a few people who live down there who all sort of know each other. Living in Norwich myself, there's not a whole lot of other YouTubers around, to say the least. But generally, if people get close, it's because they've done some kind of collaboration with another YouTuber, and they then get friendly afterwards. You think, oh, I should do that again, that was fun, that worked, and you sort of go on from there. It's certainly how I've built sort of relationships from it myself, more through chance than anything. You just meet people at something, say, oh, we should do this. All right, we do it. It's a laugh, and on we go. I mean, the really big ones, you were always aware of the other big people, as you would be in any industry. You're always aware of the biggest company, but it doesn't necessarily mean you know them. Well, the reason I don't do a video every day, really, is because I think the audience get a bit sick of it. You know, it's one of those things, there's a certain level of stuff. For gaming channels, they can do stuff very frequently. Like, daily content is actually quite a well-known thing in the gaming world. You know, a little bit of playing game X, and then a little bit more the next day, a little bit more the next day. When you've got something with a little bit more behind it, in the sense of it, oh, it's going to be something different, or it's going to be self-contained, it's not a good idea to try and do daily stuff, because you get subscriber fatigue. They look in the subscription box, it's like, oh, there's another one of that, oh, I'll catch up on that later. And they never do. Children, especially younger children, watching serialized gaming stuff will keep the interest like that, but anything more episodic, it's best to stretch it out a bit. In fact, that's something that people who are sort of paid, you know, to advise YouTube channels will often say to them, don't try and keep up with the gaming channels. That's a different kind of beast. If you're going to try and ape that, you'll end up sort of damaging yourself ultimately overall. But one of the things I like is there's no need to stick to a schedule. It's not like 7 o'clock every Friday, new Ashens video. No real need, because everybody gets informed when a new one comes out. Nice surprise. I think you would probably get slightly more views if it was very regular. I think there's something to that, but it's not enough to actually, you know, make you move everything round and schedule yourself for it. I mean, something you just couldn't do 10 years ago was like we made a feature film, and you know, go back 10 years, the support structure wasn't in place to do low budget stuff like that for two reasons. One, equipment, too expensive. Now you can make decent looking video from your phone, for crying out loud. You know, go back to the early 80s, you were lucky if somebody's dad had some clunky VHS camcorder and what you recorded on it looked worse than if you just explained it to somebody when they were half drunk later. You know, real low quality stuff. Whereas now it's so much easier and quicker and more immediate with digital editing and digital storage to get things like that done. And the second, of course, important thing is you can now reach out directly to an audience and say, we want to make this project. And through sites like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Unbound for books, for projects like that, you can go forward with it if you've got an existing fan base and say, hey, do you want to see this? If so, you know, put money in towards, we'll get you a copy of the film. And if not enough of you like it, we can't make it. And, you know, if you know what you're doing and you can prove that to people you know what you're doing and it's something they want to see, you have immense opportunities like that. I mean, some crowdfunding stuff has been massive, you know, going into millions. I mean, we weren't anywhere near that. We just had some money from a production company for digital content, which covered 59% of the budget, and we got the other 41% through crowdfunding. So people think it's a crowdfunding, really it was less than 50%, but that was still a bloody important 41%. We could have made it without it, but it would have looked cheap and we'd have had hardly any locations, and it would not have been as good on any sort of level at all. Really, the success of it, I think, is down to the fact that we managed to make more money. But if you can, you know, harness a digital audience, you can get them interested in something to make, that really, really helps what you can do to, just to get the raw money to get things going. You haven't got to convince a room full of people who aren't really interested. When I was writing the book, we went to some traditional publishers first, and it was a case of, YouTube, yeah, we've made some money with YouTube books. 14-year-old girls, will they buy anything with your face on it? No. Why are you still in my office? It really was as simple as that. Hence we went the sort of crowdfunding route. When we went in to see Unbound, they were brilliant. It's like, retro games, yeah, that's a big thing. Go talk to a traditional publisher, they've got no interest in it whatsoever. They want something off the back of a television show or something from an established author. So it then opened up this whole new possibility of getting it made. Then you reach out to the audience directly. Hey, you guys like retro games, want to read a book about really bad ones? Because we're going to write one here, And yeah, it all worked very, very well for us. We got enough money to go ahead and make it all worthwhile, made the book, and I'd like to write another one day and make another film. And I'd like to sleep sometime in the future, but I haven't got time for that. With the expired food videos, there's something of a personal favourite for me, actually, oddly. Partially because they're always sort of successful and people like them. That's nice to an extent. But personally, I'm always fascinated by what the hell is lurking in this 30-year-old tin. It is like a little time capsule of the past, a particularly horrific and stenchy time capsule at times. But I like things where I don't know exactly where it's going to go. Because, I improvise everything, so I don't script or sort of sit down or work anything out beforehand. So the more stuff that is to surprise me, the more fun I get out of it. And who the hell knows what's going to be in a chicken in a can that's been out of date for 10 years. Probably not going to be nice, but it's going to be interesting. It does make your job easier. The easiest job on YouTube, I suppose, are Let's Plays, because you're talking over a video game, etc., and it's all quite personality based. But the game is always giving you something new to talk about. There's always something new happening, and the more difficult stuff is when it's a very mundane item, which is most of my stuff in a way, I suppose, because if you just get some stuff from Poundland, it's perhaps not going to be too interesting in itself, and what keeps me interesting is the challenge of trying to keep this interesting for an audience. How can you interpret what you're seeing slightly differently in order to make it amusing? What jokes can you make about it? And you've always got to have in your head where you're going next, or you'll dry up and how to put in an edit point, which annoys me intensely because I like to try and keep everything sort of as smooth as possible. Yeah, I like a mild challenge. I like to know what's not, or I like to not know what's about to happen next.